Welcome back to day 2. How did you find yesterday, folks?
Interesting.
Interesting. Stressful. Tell me about the stress.
Really can't structure my questions properly.
Really?
Can't structure my question properly.
Okay, but you got better.
Got better than the first lesson that we had.
Okay, cool. Put your hand up if you enjoyed it.
Yes.
Yay! Training should be fun. Another's not sure. She partly enjoyed it when she was watching. She was doing it, that's so. It looked like you were enjoying it, and to be honest, firstly, thank you for. It's very hard to run that yesterday. It was stressful enough for you, but you only got to do 3 meetings each. I got to do 6, so it was quite hard. And I know you had different coaches being pulled in at different times, and buyers who were flustered at times because they were trying to get their head around the brief. So I think it worked pretty well. The main point was we really wanted you to get loads and loads of practice, and actually what you got yesterday was loads of practice. And it was really evident by the 3rd meeting that that was a good call.
Yep.
Because when we've done it before, although we've always done 3 meetings, we've done it with teams of 4 and 5, so individual people have only maybe got 1 chance to practice.
Yeah.
They've watched colleagues practice, but they've only got 1 chance, and often what happens then is they don't get a chance to try the feedback out they got at the last meeting. What I think all teams got yesterday, was an immediate chance to try, we need to try the positioning a bit differently, or we need to try the questioning a bit differently, or I need to listen a bit better, or I need to make notes, or summarise better. So I think it was great to be able to see you developing over the course of the day. Actually, I thought the level was really very, very high. Very, very high. Clearly the first meeting was the weakest, but that's because everyone's not used to it and it takes a bit of time to get your head around the case study, and the person you're working with you maybe never worked with before, so you're getting used to them. I thought all teams worked really well, harmoniously, which is great because you're going to be working with each other for the next few days, which bodes well. If you fall out on day 1, it's not good for day 5. I thought you both worked really hard. There didn't seem to be anyone disappearing off to do other jobs, so again, thank you for taking it seriously. And it's clear to me that you've taken some thought, you've done some stuff over the last few months to keep it in your mind, because I don't think you would have performed like that if you hadn't have done. So on all counts, thank you very, very much. I think you are going to get the best impact from doing that. By the end, by the 3rd meetings, they were all fantastic. All of them. Really fantastic. I'll show you some scores in a minute. But some of the highest scores I've seen in this case study, not just within Wirecard, within other payment companies that I've used it with as well. So really, really high standard. Doesn't mean it's perfect. There's always room for improvement. There's always things you can take away. We'll just capture some of that feedback now because we didn't get a chance to do it last night. I was exhausted and jet lagged and about to fall over. And I think most of you were probably quite tired with various efforts put in and flus and colds and things. So we'll have a look at the feedback first, but I just wanted to share with you first what we did this exercise, if you remember in part 1 back in May. We did a different case study, but we did the same sort of exercise. And I gave you some feedback at the time, and this was the feedback that I put up on screen last time as the things I wanted you to sort of work on and improve. Less assumptions, more questions and less statements. Better positioning statements. I thought the positioning statements last time were a little weak. I thought this time they were really strong in the main. There was still a couple of times where I think individual teams can strengthen their positioning statements, but I heard some really good positioning statements yesterday. I'm just going to pick out a few names of people I saw. Sam, I thought your positioning statement yesterday was really good in that first meeting with Renault. Really, really strong. That was the first meeting, in fact. It was very, very strong, considering we did, first meetings are usually quite difficult. So really work on that position statement. It's your opportunity to demonstrate and shine up front. Yeah? Don't give too much away. Build credibility. Demonstrate to the merchant, whether it's a new or existing merchant, new contact, existing merchant, that you understand your business. And put your strengths across, because it's really important. I'll come to that later. So, position statement last time, not great, this time much better. Listening, blank your mind, take notes. I said that last time, I'm going to say it again this time. The funneling process is the hardest bit in the structure. It is. The structure itself, everything else in the structure is relatively easy to remember. You can just take it, you can take it, draw it, You can take it in as a reminder. If you walk through those steps, your structure will be really great. But the funneling thing, you can't really plan funneling. It has to be a natural process. It has to be something you learn and practice. And really, I thought the funneling was better yesterday. By the end, really quite strong. The bit that takes time and takes practice is the listening skills, because you need the experience to pick out different things that the customer's saying. The customer says so much in 45 minutes, and you may have longer than 45 minutes. You can't pick up on everything. Not every trigger can be picked up on. So you have to get that experience of which bits am I going to focus on? Where am I going to take this? What do I think is the most important thing for the customer that I think I can have some impact on myself within our solution later on? So keep doing these great things. I saw some great note-taking yesterday. I saw some less great note-taking. And it was evident for me when the note-taking was good, the questions were better, and the listening was better. When the note-taking was less good, the listening was less good. So there is a connection between the two. Don't talk about your product. You don't know everything enough to talk about it. I didn't hear too much of that yesterday. I know a few of you did get the feedback that maybe you were selling a bit too early, and there is a enthusiasm about us as salespeople when we're passionate about our product and we hear a requirement. We do sometimes want to get early in on that requirement. Just leave it, just note it. There'll be plenty of time to give them that full brief of full detail. By all means, because this is what we want, it's a conversation, by all means signpost it. What I mean by signpost is make reference to it, tease me about it, but then take it away again. Yeah. So as a couple of times yesterday, I saw a few, and I'll pick out Brad as one of them. Brad started talking about Australia and pay after delivery, a couple of different alternative payment methods, and it just laid it in my mind, but then took it back again. Yeah. So I know for future it's going to come up. I'm expecting it as part of your solution. I'm excited by it, but you haven't given me too much detail for me to be able to start objecting to it, because you don't know enough yet in order to fully put it forward as part of your solution. So I think it's a great technique to signpost things, but you need to know when to balance those two things out. An old boss of mine used to say, sell the sizzle, not the sausage. What I mean by that is, when you walk past a restaurant, you can smell the food, you can perhaps start a moat towards it, but as yet you haven't actually seen it yet. So you're being drawn in by the smell, not by the contents. And that's what we're trying to do here, is just signposting it just to give an indication as to where we're going without too much detail. So that was good. I like most of what you did yesterday in terms of that. Good questions have to be relevant to the individual person. It was a comment we made last time. Much better this time. You probably felt that from the reactions to the customer. When we looked blank, or we sort of were confused, or we didn't give you good information, it's because the question really wasn't related to us. Payments questions to people with a commercial background, some of it we can answer, some of it we're not interested in. Focus on the agenda of the content, and you'll get a much better quality conversation, even if you don't get everything you need. The important thing is you get the conversation on terms of the customer, not on terms of you. Other people can answer the detail. And there will be times, and we'll talk about it today, where your customer can't answer the questions about the detail because they don't understand it. So there's a couple of questions I had yesterday where people were saying, what payment types would you like for your new emerging markets? And I'm going, I don't know. I haven't got a preference. I want you to advise me on it. I don't know what's available, so how can I answer that question? I'm not being obtuse, I'm not being difficult, I just don't know. And actually, that's great. Because if a customer thinks they know but they're wrong, that's way harder. Oh yeah, I'd really like to take on PayPal, please, for China. And you're going, oh shit, that's the wrong one. Then you've got to try and convince me to turn my mind around. So it's much better if I go, I don't know, I'm trusting you to give me advice. Yeah. So sometimes not having the answer for the customer is as good as having the answer. I love it when a customer can't answer my questions, because it means I have an opportunity to answer it for them. This means I'm useful. I add value to the situation, rather than just understanding what they want and offering it back to them. That's the consultative thing we want to get into. Selling is motivating commitment. Be interested in the person. I'm going to make comment about that in a second if I can do. And the last point was about every meeting must finish. Every sales activity must have a commitment to it. Yesterday I thought that was much better. There were very few times where we walked away without a next step. Even if it was, drop me an email with a date on it. There was usually a next step conversation going on. If you remember from part 1, I talked about 4 hard commitments. And they were work, time, reputation, and money. Those are the 4 things I'm looking to achieve at the end of every sales conversation. If I pick the phone up to try and make an appointment with a customer I've never spoken to, the commitment I'm looking for is time. If I'm in a meeting, discussing, exploring, finding out brief, probably my next commitment is either another meeting or perhaps some work for them to give me information about their current supplier, maybe some data, maybe some information about acceptance rates, whatever it might be. If I'm talking to somebody who's not senior enough, my next commitment is reputation. Get me into somebody higher. That's what I'm looking for as the next step. And if I'm right down the sales process towards the end, again, whether it's existing customer or new, I'm then looking for the money commitment, which is a contract that will lead to some sort of invoicing. So those 4 things, they can happen at any point in any sales activity, but I'm looking for at least one of them. Why? Because if they give me one of those 4, it tells me they are committed to the next step. If they don't give me one of those 4 things, I start to then worry that I'm wasting my time. And I don't like wasting time. I need to challenge that. I need to know that they want to move this to the next stage. And if they don't, I need to understand why. So that's what I said last time. Let's have a look at yesterday. Here's some. I'm going to split the groups, group 1, group 2. We're going to have a winner from each group. I tell you why I think that's fair, is because you have, in group 2, more time to prep, less time to review, and in group 1 you have less time to prep and more time to review. So I think it's only fair that we keep the 2 groups separate. These are the scores in no particular order. This is not team 1, team 2, team 3. I've just mixed them up in terms of score size. Yesterday there were 300 points on offer. There was a total of 300 points, and every meeting was measured by the buyer that did it immediately afterwards, so it was fresh in their mind. So that's a really good performance across all 6 teams. Actually, we're talking about 60% and above across all 3. Last time we did this, we were around about the 50% mark, so we're already seeing quite a big improvement. However, some standout performances. One of the teams did 87 out of 100 in the final meeting. I'd be proud of that. You know, even somebody who does this structure all the time in their own selling, I'd be pretty chuffed if someone said to me 9 out of 10. Yeah, I'll take that, because we don't need 100. We just need to be better than the other competitor. We just need to be better than the other people that we're up against. So that was awesome. Actually, there was a 90% in the second group. It was even higher, so fantastic. And I'm actually quite a tough scorer compared to other buyers. Like Joshua and Dolan, probably less tough than me for 2 reasons. A, they're your colleagues, but B, also they're not perhaps looking at quite the same things as me. I'm looking probably more technically at it. And I even scored one of the third meetings about 80% yesterday for one of the groups, so that for me is pretty good. Second group, a little bit of a gap between one of the teams and the other 2 teams. That's absolutely easy to make up, by the way. There's another 300 odd points on offer in terms of the, if you like, the competition. But one of the teams was superb right the way through, 80% performance right the way through their 3 meetings. However, that's great. What I was even more impressed by is these 2 teams got off to quite a slow start. I'm not going to tell you who you are, but you got off to quite a slow start. The difference between your first meetings, both these teams, meeting 1 and meeting 3 was about 40% difference.
Wow.
So actually that's even more impressive for me, because the performance improvement is 100%. So brilliant. Really, really chuffed with your output. It's not about competition, as you know, it's about the learning. But it's nice to have a competitive edge to it anyway. We have seen teams do great on day 1 and fall apart on days 3 and 4. Okay, so don't be complacent. If you think you're the team with the top score there's a lot that can go right and wrong in the presentations and the whiteboarding and everything else. So and if you're a bit behind, and you want to make it a massive opportunity for you to do that. So that's certainly nothing, all to play for at least. Just some comments on yesterday. So generally, really good structure. I was really impressed from the first meeting how well you've taken on board that explore structure that Corvina is holding in front of her. Good opening phases, checking of time, loads of checking of objectives, which is a pet bugbear for me. I don't see that enough in real life, actually, and I think it's a massive difference in what other salespeople do. I think it immediately gives the customer a chance to define where they're going with a meeting, so that was great. Only comment I would have on that is, some of you take a long time to ask that question. It shouldn't take long, just be really bold. By the way, Mr. Guster, what would you like to get out of the next 45 minutes? Yeah, be really blunt, be really assertive, don't be subservient. There was a bit too much. If you don't mind, if it's possible, I would love to know exactly what, over the next 45 minutes, you would like to get out in regards to, it's just too long-winded, shorten everything up, just be very bold, very blunt. If they don't know, I think we do that because we're not sure if the customer has something in their mind. Don't worry. If the customer goes, I don't know, somebody told me to meet with you, that's fine, that's where they're at. If they tell you, at least you know that. And then that's your opportunity to say, well, let me tell you what I think you will get out of this meeting over the next 45 minutes. So then you can then take charge of it. Most customers, though, will have a bit of an idea. If they've given up their time, they will have had some reason why they gave it up. So it was good that you were asking it. Be a bit more assertive, a bit clearer in terms of asking for it if you can do. Positioning, it was already mentioned. I thought most of the positioning was good. Be a bit careful, particularly when you meet somebody that you think knows you well, as a business or as an individual. And this is a message for RMs, actually. Remember, people might have worked with us for years. They don't necessarily know what we're up to. Yeah, they're probably in the business as usual sort of phase, dealing with the stuff they're used to. I would recommend, even when you go back and see some of your biggest merchants, maybe every 12 months, just say to them, look, it's been a long time since we've told you an update of Wirecard. Would it be useful if I just give you a quick update of what we're involved with? And do you know what? Most customers who are engaged with you and see it as a long-term partnership will probably go, yes, please. Now, obviously, you don't need to tell them about you necessarily. Unless you're a new RM and a new account, then definitely I would do it. But certainly all this stuff about sitting, give them a bit of good feelings about how we're doing with migration. You know, any of the background in regards to the investigation, you might want to just put them at ease on that potentially. There's all sorts of things you may want to update them with. Maybe different in Thailand, maybe different in Philippines. So don't feel that just because you're positioned and won a merchant, you don't need to keep positioning. Do that regularly. I thought the topics on your funnels were much more relevant and much more focused on the person of each buyer, so that was good. I thought the questioning in general was better. Much more open questions, better thinking questions, not too much slipping into the closed questions at the top of the funnel. So I thought the quality in the questions was good. However, I think, again, something I would encourage all of you to consider. It's not just about asking open and closed questions, it's also about just getting a phrasing right. Sometimes you may have found the customer going, oh, sorry, I don't understand what you want. Now, we're not doing that to be difficult, we're actually just doing that to demonstrate to you that we really didn't understand the question. But we didn't understand the question because you maybe didn't really phrase it properly. Now, I know some of you are working in second language, and there's always a challenge with that as well, but I would just encourage you to think about how you phrase it. A really well-asked thinking question, it's probably 4 or 5 words, and it's quite snappy. It doesn't need a long introduction, it doesn't need a lot of words to it. In fact, the more words you put in the question, the narrower the answer gets, isn't it? Yeah? So what are your goals for the future? Wide. What are your goals for the future in terms of your emerging markets over the next 12 months? If you consider payments as not, do you see what I mean? It's just, suddenly I've narrowed down the field of vision more, and you're going to miss some of the stuff that perhaps you might have got if you made it wider. So be careful on the phrasing, just be a little bit punchier. With the thinking questions, you can actually plan that. You can do that before the meeting. Just sit down, write out your thinking questions for your funnel, and then just think, are they long? Are they too long? Are they too long-winded? Check it with colleagues, talk to other people. Funneling's really hard, it takes practice. To just pick up the things that you want to hear. It will happen over time if you keep practicing this. If you keep practicing it both in your actual sales meetings but also in this environment or working with colleagues, and I would encourage that. It won't happen by osmosis, you have to put time to it. It will start to become easier and just natural, to the point where you won't even know you're doing it. You know, funneling just becomes part of your communication sort of toolkit, as a case. So keep practicing that. And try and respond to all those triggers. I think you did pretty well with the triggers yesterday, but there were times, and I'm sure you had this feedback, where I remember a particular meeting where I mentioned indicators about 4 times. I can't remember who that was with. Yeah, I think it might be with your team, Peter. It might have been. I said, you know, there's lots of indicators here that tell me we're not growing as fast as we should be. And when I've repeated that 3 or 4 times, that should be the trigger. So if the customer wants to talk about this, let's ask him about it. Yeah, not all customers will tell you everything. They might indicate it. Just a final thing in terms of being more personal. Remember, merchants are not just buying Wirecard. And we'll come to this when we talk about the value proposition later. They're buying you. They're buying you. Now, I know some of you will be BDs who will be passing that account on to an RM, but they're still buying you and your advice and what you bring to their business. So demonstrate that in your conversations with people. I'm going to slightly embarrass Mao and Brad again. One of the most comfortable meetings yesterday was the one we had with Brad. And partly because the first question, I forget if this is exactly the right question, Brad, but you can remind me if I get this wrong. He asked me how I was getting on. I've only been here 6 months within the business, which a lot of you ask, you know, so you've only been here 6 months, how's it going? And his second question was, enjoying it? And I was like, oh, shit, it's not my brief. I'm going to have to actually talk like a human being. And it was great because it was just really very friendly. It opened it up to a really very, very friendly conversation. Helped by the fact that, of course, Jude is the more Wirecard champion anyway, so that becomes easier. But those emotional type of questions are really, really useful. They demonstrate you're interested. I think you do them naturally in your real lives anyway, so I don't know why you wouldn't do it in a sales conversation. And it makes me feel more comfortable. I'm going to open up more. There is a great need, obviously in sales conversations, to identify facts. But if you just identify facts, that's not enough. You need to understand opinions. I'll give you a very good example here. Come on in. Come and grab a seat. Is there a seat there? Nick Moyle. Oh, hello. Do you want to just very quickly introduce yourself, because people might not know who you are?
Oh, okay, sure. Hi, morning everyone. I'm Magdalene. So I just joined World Wirecard. This week is my 2nd week. Yeah, so I'm actually from Cecilia. I'm actually from the digital vertical team.
A new BD, and she's asked, because she wants to come on a training, can I get an early look at it? So I've said she can come and sit in. I hope you don't mind that. Why don't you, I'll put this chair back there and you can sit. If you get too close, you'll not see everything, and then you can come and sit in with the group. Oh, I'll put you in here, look. Sit between the 2 other BDs. Rose between thorns. Alright, so facts and opinions. So facts really important. Opinions just as important. I'll give you an example here. So this is my target. This is Jude's target for the next 3 years. We're going to grow emerging markets by 150 million. That's great. It's good information to know. I can use that in a solution. I can see how payments might impact on that. But here's a question I didn't hear very often, which is this one. How do you feel about that? Wow. Wow. Now it's not just about you know my target. You're actually asking me what I think. What response might I give to that question?
It's kind of high. It's pretty high.
I'm really nervous about it. Yeah, I'm actually really nervous about it. Actually, I think it's easy. I think if we do the right things, I think we can achieve that. Do you know what? I think the timescale is a bit tight. I'm quite concerned that if we don't get these new countries on board, because that's most of the growth, we won't have enough time to reach that. So I'm really concerned about how we get those emerging markets up and running. So I suddenly get a whole different view about that information, and it's so important. Don't be frightened of asking people's opinions, because number one, emotions are very important to our decision-making process. Number 2, it demonstrates you're interested. Number 3, you'll get far greater depth of understanding about it than you will if you just think about the facts. So really try and balance those two facts and opinions. Really important. Alright, so that was what I saw. Tell me your own personal learning point, please. I'm just going to go around the room that way. So on the nod, sat in the wrong place always. So if I can ask you just to pick out your one thing. In fact, why don't you go with this phrase, have after yesterday, in future I will ...
So
That's the phrase I want you to use. After yesterday, in future I will ... So for example, I will make more notes when I'm in meetings. That's what I'd like you to do. One phrase, please. And I'd also like to ensure that you get those on your action plans too. So if you haven't got your action plan out, or if you're putting your actions somewhere else, that's fine as well. But if I can make sure that all of that great feedback you had from yesterday gets stuck down on your action plan, otherwise you'll lose it. So I'll give you a couple of seconds just to think about what you want to tell me, and then we'll talk it through. That's it, don't mind where you put your action plan. You've also got the paper copy. If you want to put it somewhere else, you can. It's just easier if you've got somewhere you can jot things down quickly. Okay, we'll start with Moyle. After yesterday, in future, I will what?
Listen what happened.
How?
How and let the buyer speak to them.
Don't interrupt.
Don't interrupt.
Brilliant, well done. There's a lot of interruption yesterday, but actually some times where you didn't as well, so it's really important. Sometimes customers will waffle. Do you know what I mean by waffle? They just talk on. I think it's fine if it's in context with your question. Some people will just talk more than others. However, if a customer starts to deviate onto areas that are totally irrelevant, I think then it's applicable to try and bring them back into the question. But if they're giving you genuinely good information, let them speak. I think we interrupt partly because we hear a trigger, and then we go, ah! Well, write it down. That's why you need to write the triggers down, because you might have 6 or 7 triggers in one response. If it's a really good question, you'll get lots of information. Don't interrupt them before they can give it to you. Brilliant, thank you.
I will take more point notes and listen more. Basically, I've been scribbling whatever they are saying, so I didn't really listen. So instead of writing points instead of...
It's really difficult as well. It's a balance, right? If you